What happens when America's sweetheart comes face to face with the most acidic-tongued women on daytime television? What you're about to see isn't just a clash of egos, it's a scene that will leave you absolutely speechless. It's the one and only Dolly Parton, a woman known throughout the world for her grace, diplomacy, and sweet-as-pie attitude. Suddenly, she is at the heart of what may be the most explosive confrontation in talk show history. It wasn't a typical celeb interview gone wrong. It was a groundbreaking event that changed everything we thought we knew. Stick with me for the moment that everyone will be talking about, and make sure you hit that subscribe button before we dive into all the juicy details. Do you think celebs owe us their opinions on political issues? The spotlight glares off the View's familiar set. Dolly Parton takes her seat as a guest. Even with the palpable tension in the room, her signature smile seems to glow with an inner warmth. Clad in an iridescent turquoise suit, with her perfectly sculpted blonde hair and surrounded by the blinding light of the studio, the legend smiles as a thunderous ovation fills the air. But something is different in the room. As she settles, the hosts exchange knowing glances that are dripping with an unspoken agenda. Dolly, welcome back to The View. Whoopi's tone is familiar and laced with something a veteran of the show no means trouble is on the horizon. It's so good to have you with us. Thank you for having me, honey. Dolly's smooth Tennessee twang seems to soothe the room as she adjusts her stance. It's always such a pleasure to be here with you ladies. But the pleasantries don't last long. Dolly, we wanted to talk to you about some things you said recently about some of our political figures. The word around the country is you've been playing both sides of the fence. Joy Behar's voice drips with an accusation and her eyes dart to Dolly's, looking for a rise. The room collectively leans forward, feeling the switch in tone. The trap is set, but how would the Queen of Country play it? Dolly's smile is unwavering, but there's a noticeable flicker of steel behind her eyes as she replies, "Well, Joy, I've always believed in treating people with kindness, no matter what their political views may be. That's how I was raised. But don't you feel that at some point silence becomes complicity? And with a platform like yours, shouldn't you be speaking out against injustice?" Sunny's voice rises with a fierce passion and the room becomes dead silent. Is Dolly going to crack? The rings on Dolly's fingers sparkle as she clasps her hands over her lap. Sunny darling, I feel like my responsibility is to my music, my fans, and spreading love across this world. I've never been one to claim to be a political pundit. That's a cop-out and you know it. You can't just hide behind your music while the country is going up in flames. Joy's voice booms through the studio as she practically shouts at Dolly. The tension in the room is thick and you can see the discomfort in the eyes of audience members. This interview has officially gone off the rails, beyond any previously defined boundaries for a typical friendly sit-down. With the same perfect composure as before, there's an unmistakable undercurrent of steel under the sweetness in Dolly's voice. Looking directly at Joy, she delivered a sentence that silenced the room completely. "I'm not hiding behind anything, Joy." Was that the moment that America's sweetheart finally said enough, or the moment she showed the world what she's truly made of? I'm going to try to focus on the positive, the unity we share, not what divides us, Dolly said, her voice a calm presence in the storm that was brewing around them. But that was not the tone the hosts were going for. What unites us? Sarah basically spat the question out, with all the cynicism her tone could possibly convey. Dolly, if you'll permit me to say this with the greatest of respect, that sounds like privileged white woman nonsense to me. Not all of us can stand idly by and maintain our neutrality. The studio audience erupted in a chorus of gasps and protests. An icy cold permeated the studio, freezing even the cameramen in place. This was no longer a discussion. It was personal. Dolly's famous smile finally cracked. The carefully crafted mask slipped from her face for a fleeting moment to reveal the hurt underneath before snapping back into place with a bright, brittle smile. "Sarah, I hear what you're saying," Dolly started, "but I do not believe that the color of my skin or the extent of my career should determine the path I take in order to do good in the world." "The way I see it, Dolly, is you are not doing anything," Whoopi said, her bluntness hitting Dolly with the impact of a physical blow. "And for that, I am disappointed in you because I have idolized you for many years." The studio was at a breaking point. What does a global idol say when her entire reputation is being questioned in front of millions of people on live TV? "Ladies," Dolly began, her tone measured but laced with an iron-like firmness that could be heard across the studio. "I think we are not seeing eye to eye on this. I have never said I am doing nothing. I have funded a literacy foundation that has given away millions of books to children, donated to disaster relief funds and research organizations, as well as provided millions of dollars to education. The difference is that I don't have a need to broadcast every single political idea I have to the public. But you will stand beside and show pictures of yourself standing next to politicians that have explicitly worked to undermine and roll back women's rights and rights to minority groups, Joy said, leaning closer as she revealed a wad of printed social media posts. What do you say to that? Dolly took one look at the papers but did not reach for them. She didn't even blink. Joy, over my lifetime I've taken photos with thousands of people. The act of taking a photograph doesn't mean I endorse a person's whole political platform. It implies something. Sunny cut in sharply, and what that implies is a betrayal to many of your fans. Betrayal? The word hung heavy in the studio. Dolly straightened her posture and her spine seemed to turn into steel. Betrayal is a very powerful word, Sunny. I have never, and I mean never, betrayed anyone. I have stayed true to myself and my beliefs that kindness, generosity, and treating all individuals with respect is what makes this world better. Even those who show no compassion towards others, Sarah asked, even those who deliberately seek to diminish the value of the human rights of vulnerable people? I believe in people's ability to grow and change. Dolly's voice strengthened as it echoed with a conviction that came from her southern roots. I have seen it happen, and writing someone off does not seem very charitable. I try to be charitable in the way I conduct my life. Slam! Joy's hand met the table in a loud crack, making Dolly jump slightly. It's not about being charitable, Dolly. It's about accountability, and it's about using your influence when it is most important. The studio was a tinderbox about to ignite, and the fuse was almost gone. The way I choose to use my influence is the way I will continue to use my influence, Dolly responded, her southern drawl becoming thicker as emotion started to show on her face. We do not all have to have the same method of activism to make a difference. Whoopi leaned forward, her eyes locked on Dolly, not allowing her to budge even an inch. When you have the voice that you have and you refuse to lend that voice to issues that affect lives, and I mean lives, you speak volumes with your silence. Does Dolly Parton's silence speak peace, or a refusal to meet reality head-on? This had turned from a conversation about a guest to the very soul of an American icon, and Dolly was about to let them know what she truly had to say. I don't remain silent, Dolly said, her voice raising for the first time as it sliced through the crosstalk. I am silent through my music. I am silent through my kindness. I am silent through my charity. It has always been my firm belief that it's possible to change someone's heart through love and kindness much better than you could ever change it through anger or aggression. The host was right there, ready to attack. How naive can you be? Sarah yelled, narrowed eyes piercing Dolly. Love and kindness won't protect anyone's voting rights. They can't protect anybody from book banning. They don't keep any of our most vulnerable children safe from attack. You're living in some fairy tale. The entire studio audience was stunned. You could have heard a pin drop, as the entire world waited to see how this beloved legend's composed nature was going to unravel. The sweetness was stripped from Dolly, and her tough and resilient strength shone through, taking the host's surprise. Sarah, I may be a great many things, Dolly said in a steady warning that threatened, but naive is not one of them. I've lived decades of change in this country, and I know what works, and I know what doesn't. What works is speaking out and standing up for yourself, Joy screamed, leaning across the table. What doesn't work is pretending everything is okay when everything around us is burning down. I never said that everything was okay, Dolly retorted, sharp and biting, but I don't think every single interaction in life should turn into a debate about politics. There are those of us who choose to build bridges instead of burning them. The conversation was on a wildfire of sorts, and the Queen of Kindness was being pushed to her limits, turning the studio into a powder keg. Build bridges? Sunny scoffed, laced with so much sarcasm you could almost taste it. Dolly, some bridges need to be burned. Some things are so morally corrupt that there isn't any middle ground left. There are simply no compromises to be found. Dolly's knuckles, encased in her jewelry, turned white as she gripped her armrests, her composure on the verge of snapping. Sunny, in my long and successful career, I've been using music to bring people together. I've watched my songs heal hearts over races and political issues and all the rest. So don't tell me that building bridges doesn't work. Joy interrupted with a disbelieving, cynical laugh. Dolly, your songs are for entertainment. Your songs don't uphold or protect laws. Entertainment is what changes people's hearts. Dolly retaliated, her southern drawl laced with her true emotion. Once their hearts have been changed, their minds can be changed too. And once someone's mind is changed, well, then the whole world will change. That is the true way of creating lasting change. Sarah vigorously shook her head, her voice sympathetic. That's a fairy tale, Dolly. It's just a comforting little story to help you get through the night while other people struggle. Privileged? The word hung in the air, and Dolly Parton, America's sweetheart, showed her anger to the world for the very first time. Her voice rose to a dangerous and powerful level. Privileged? Dolly boomed back, her eyes fiery and determined. Let me tell you something about privilege. I come from a single room shack with 11 children. I know what it's like to not have a thing in the world besides your dignity and your dreams. The hosts had pushed America's beloved sweetie too far, and it seemed the mountain girl from Tennessee was about to unleash her wrath. Don't go anywhere, because what Dolly says next silenced the room. I was so poor I couldn't even pay to attend, Dolly said, her humorous lines turned sharp and defensive. I've worked for everything I have, and I've worked all of it up to lift other people up every single day of my life. But the hosts were determined not to yield. They were moving in for the kill. Economic hardship is no excuse for white privilege, and it does not give you a license to not be responsible, Sarah stated plainly and quickly. A gasp rippled through the audience as people began to murmur to one another, some of them clearly in disbelief, and some of them obviously incensed. Dolly's face, usually a portrait of warmth and grace, was burning red as her calm composure began to crack and crumble for good. Responsible, Dolly said with outrage. I have given away more money to people than most individuals in the world will ever even lay their eyes upon. I have created so many jobs, provided education and medical research that have saved countless lives. So what have I not done? You did not use your platform when it counted, Whoopi said softly and with determination. You did not take a stand when it counted and had the actual power to do so. I stand up for hate every day with love. Dolly's voice trembled, quivering from suppressed fury. I stand up for hate by refusing to partake in this hateful rhetoric that is tearing our country apart. The tension was palpable. Was the world's most loved idol going to be canceled on live television? Joy let out a sarcastic and sharp laugh that cut through the studio silence. Hateful rhetoric? Confronting racism is not hateful. Confronting homophobia is not hateful. Confronting attacks on our democracy is not hateful. It's just downright necessary. Who are you to decide what is necessary? Dolly challenged with her famous temper boiling over, a rare display for her in her 50 years of performing. Who determined that your method is the only one effective in creating a positive change in our world? The people who are suffering have determined it, Sarah replied cold-heartedly. Those whose rights are being jeopardized, the ones that you have let down through your inaction. I have not let anyone down, Dolly shouted, her voice booming throughout the hushed studio. I have spent my entire career bringing people up, encouraging hope, and showing the world that no one from nothing can become something. Hope will not end voter suppression, Sunny stated, her words sharp as a razor. Hope will not stop book bans. Hope will certainly not protect transgender children from unfair laws. And rage will not create long-term change, Dolly argued, her hands flailing in the air. Rage will only create more rage, and division will only create more division. That is something I have seen my entire life, and it's something I will not participate in. Anger is necessary sometimes, Whoopi insisted, practically leaning out of her chair. It's often the only logical answer to injustice. Dolly leaned in with a fiery glint in her eyes, something the world had never seen before. And Whoopi, sometimes anger will prevent you from seeing solutions. It will get you so focused on winning the argument that you'll be ineffective. Joy let out another short laugh and threw her hands up in exasperation. Effective? What part of letting democracy fall around our ears is effective? The stage was set for a monumental showdown. Would Dolly Parton storm off the set? Or would she make a final statement that would forever change the narrative? Stay tuned, because the conclusion to this showdown is one you have to see to believe. And what's effective about screaming at the people that otherwise may actually listen to you? Dolly exclaimed, her voice ringing with a tone of earned clarity. And what's effective about making every conversation a litmus test? And what good is about every conversation being a war? The room felt like it was electrified. Although stunned, the hosts could only stare. Sarah in particular leaned in with an intense look of conviction. Well, some conversations should be a war, Dolly, and there's always something worth fighting for with all that you have. And I agree with that, Dolly chirped back, surprising them with a sudden shift in tone. But fighting isn't always what you make of it. Sometimes the bravest thing that you can ever do is say no to hatred winning by refusing to hate them back. There was a long and heavy silence before Sunny began again. Well, it's easy to say that when you are not the target and there are no of your own fundamental rights that are being threatened. Dolly began to stare with a personal steel that was now visible in her eyes to the world at home. You don't have the slightest idea of what I have been the target of, Sunny, and what battles I have fought behind closed doors. You do not know how many people have told me what my opinion is, or has to be. I just do not choose to broadcast my fights. The argument continued with the question on everyone's mind: why was it kept in private? And what does fighting them publicly involve? Why won't you take a step onto that giant platform and try to save this country? Joy demanded. Because I believe in no political litmus tests and no tests for what people should think to make themselves decent. I have seen decent people and awful people on both sides of everything, Dolly replied. Both sides? Dolly, we are not talking about tax brackets, we are talking about people's basic rights. Sarah screeched back. And you know as well as I do that what I support, Dolly, is everyone's basic rights. They always have been. The argument was almost suffocating. Whoopi leaned in and asked one more definitive question. What basic rights do you share with people that want to strip voting rights from individuals? What basic rights do you share with people that want to ban books? I share the idea of the right of the American people to live in this country and pursue all their hopes and dreams. We disagree on the methods of achieving the best results for America, but I believe in my heart that all humans want the best possible lives and situations for their families, Dolly said softly yet strong. Well, that's quite naive, Joy interrupted with a sigh, because that is exactly what those other women want. They simply want to rule, and they will crush anyone in their way. And some of those women also want to be right more than they want to do right, Dolly retorted with a sharp tongue, finally breaking free from the sweetheart persona. Some women just want to have someone else to pull down. The studio fell into an almost silent room. Their disagreement had reached its highest, most visible peak yet, and all of the women were visibly stunned as if they were truly shocked by Dolly Parton and Mountain Girl from Tennessee's sharp words. Would the hosts of the talk show have finally met their match? The world was watching, but there was only one thing they were sure of. Dolly Parton just proved that kindness isn't always a weak. It can be one of the most lethal weapons. You think we're the ones breaking it all down? Sarah's question was a whisper that had dropped to a dangerous low hum, a place from which no one ever returns. Dolly didn't blink. I think calling me names for not being political enough is not going to sway a single vote or a single heart, she said. I think perhaps there's room for a different approach in this movement. Not one that tries to cozy up to the enemy, Joy declared, her jaw clenched. Enemy? Dolly's voice rose again, filling the rafters. That's exactly what I'm talking about. When did disagreeing with people turn them into enemies? When did political differences turn into bitter hatred? The air in the studio felt thick, heavy, almost ready to snap. The audience was getting a side of Dolly Parton that they had never seen. When that disagreement is with someone who is hell-bent on hurting people, Whoopi said, her voice icy and final, then yes, it becomes enmity. Some things cannot be excused. And who determines what is inexcusable? Dolly boomed, her voice rising to meet theirs, no longer a fragile songbird but a force of nature. You? The panel? The media? Since when have we all agreed that complicated political matters have only one single answer? Slam! Sarah's hand hit the table, the sound sharp as a gunshot. Since it started impacting people's lives, since it started hurting children, since it started tearing families apart. Children are hurt by hatred, Dolly shot back, her eyes burning with a fierce, brilliant light. Families are torn apart by the kind of anger and division you are fostering right here on this stage. You think you are trying to solve this problem, but you are just adding gasoline to the fire. We are trying to put the fire out, Joy screamed, her facade crumbling completely. We are trying to save democracy while you fiddle while Rome burns. The room fell into a deathly silence. Dolly's voice dropped to that same dangerously quiet, vibrating hum. Me? People like me, Joy? Joy hesitated, the weight of her words pressing down on her. She knew she had gone too far, but Sarah, with the urgency of a wildfire, leapt into the void. People who get to float above it all while other people fight for their lives. I have fought for my life, Dolly said, her voice raw and shaking, filled with a righteous rage. I fought my way out of poverty. I fought for respect in a man's world. I fought people who tried to tell me what I could or could not do, who tried to shrink me, minimize me, and silence me. You do not get to sit there and tell me that I do not know how to fight. Then fight now, Sunny demanded, refusing to back down. Fight for what's right. Get out of your image and take a goddamn stand. Dolly laughed, a short, bitter, sharp laugh that sliced through the host's demands. My image? You think this is about my image? You think I have spent 60 years of my life, 24/7 in show business, worried about what people thought about my image? Yes, Joy said, her eyes hard. I think you are afraid of alienating your fan base. I think you have stayed safe while the world has gone to hell around you. The accusation landed like a physical blow. The ensuing silence was deafening. The sweetheart of America had a choice to make: retreat into silence or show the world the woman behind the rhinestones. When you push a legend too far, what happens then? You are about to find out. The studio suddenly became silent after Dolly suddenly rose to her feet, the wheels of her chair shrieking against the linoleum as it flew out from beneath her. Every eye in the audience watched in awe as Dolly loomed over the panel, her naturally sweet disposition now replaced by something utterly menacing and determined. Safe? Her voice boomed through the room, echoing with an energy the audience didn't expect. You think I've played it safe? You think building a billion-dollar empire as a woman born into the poorest dirt in Appalachia was safe? You think writing songs about domestic violence, female empowerment, and social justice was safe? You think supporting LGBT rights decades before anyone else in the music industry believed they were something to even stand for was safe? I'll tell you this, it absolutely wasn't safe. Whoopi held her gaze, unfazed by the sudden change in tone. Then why won't you just do it now? Why won't you tell us names? Because I've learned a few things in my life that you clearly haven't. Dolly answered her voice now cutting through the air like a sharpened dagger. I've learned that real change comes not from screaming at people until they cave and pretend they've become something they're not, but from winning people over from their heart. It's just not going to happen without pressure, Sarah exclaimed in response, her voice escalating in an attempt to match Dolly's. It's just not going to happen without consequences. Hearts will never change until they connect, Dolly countered back, and Sarah began to rise to her feet. Hearts will only change once you show people that there's something better than whatever they've chosen to live for, not just berate them for not listening to you. Some positions are still completely indefensible, Joy stated firmly. Some stances that you have clearly seen are simply wrong, and denying that you see what you've been told is wrong is only saying that you agree with them. And some people, Dolly whispered, her voice now barely audible yet chillingly resonant with a power the studio held their breath for, are so steeped in their own perceived self-righteousness that the fog of their own anger cannot even begin to clear so that they can see. The fight had clearly reached a climax, the television studio now at a precipice as the hosts and the legend battled for the heart and soul of activism. Our anger is righteous, Sunny exclaimed in defense of her colleagues. My approach is equally righteous. Dolly rebutted with the force of a charging bull. But I guess that doesn't count in your utopian universe where everyone must see the world through the same pair of bifocals. Whoopi stood up to meet Dolly's gaze directly across the table. There is no room for neutrality when democracy itself is under attack. I am not neutral, Dolly stated resolutely. I am strategic, and I am thinking about the long game and the real outcome, rather than just trying to pick an argument with every single news cycle that comes along. Joy let out a sound of disdain. The long game? How long are the communities in crisis supposed to wait for you to take your so-called long game and implement a solution for us? How long have your tactics been implemented? Dolly shot back with perfect and devastating clarity. Because I am looking at a country where every argument, no matter how small or large, ends in a war between two people who only want to shout the other down. That's because you won't take a side, Sarah shouted as she pointed at Dolly. And that's because you have turned every argument into a fight, Dolly shouted back in frustration. The studio was electric with a palpable tension. The audience, glued to their seats with anticipation, seemed to hold their breath, and camera operators froze, unable to look away from the sheer magnitude of emotion unfolding before their very eyes. You know what? Whoopi stated in her final tone. I think we've said enough, and clearly this just isn't working anymore. Finally, Dolly replied as she went to retrieve her purse from the side of the table. Something you and I can finally agree on. No, Dolly, Whoopi continued as the entire studio froze at her tone. This conversation has come to an end. You're going to have to leave now. A collective, thunderous gasp rippled through the studio as the Queen of Country was effectively removed from the air. Yet, as Dolly Parton turned and walked off the stage, the world couldn't help but wonder, who really won this war? Poverty, Nashville, and the music industry itself had not conquered Dolly Parton, so would she ever be able to stand up to the wit and cutting tongues of daytime television's elite hosts? Either way, today's encounter would forever change the way that the country perceived her and the nature of what it truly meant to be politically active. Dolly stared at Whoopi with outright disbelief. The atmosphere in the room felt like it was sucked thin. You're asking me to leave? I'm telling you to leave. Whoopi declared with no room for argument. This is supposed to be a conversation for productive engagement, not a platform for people who refuses to stand up for what is right. Productive engagement? Dolly exclaimed in utter disbelief, which no doubt was mirrored by millions viewing at home. That's what you call it? Ambushing my character, questioning my integrity, and kicking me off the air for my refusal to compromise my belief on political terms? We're asking you to leave because your stance is harmful. Joy stepped forward to support Whoopi. Your silence in the face of injustice is harmful. Dolly's voice was a cold, rumbling rage. My position is that love conquers all hatred. My position is that building bridges works better than burning them, and that changing hearts matter more than winning arguments. If you deem that to be harmful, perhaps the issue is not with me. The issue, Sarah's voice was as cold as the winter wind, is with the people who thinks they can remain neutral while others do the fighting for justice. The fighting? Dolly's voice was almost a roar, and her voice that of the hillbilly star, who had been there from the beginning. That of the one who had seen a lifetime of battles that others can only imagine. I've been fighting for all of my life and then some. It is not enough, Whoopi declared. And we are done with this. The room looked like a powder keg ready to explode. Would Dolly leave in tears or stand her ground and take the show back? Dolly stared at Whoopi for an extended, heavy moment, her chest rising and falling until slowly picking up her purse and gazing directly at the main camera and into the eyes of the nation. You see, America. Dolly's voice was steady, resonating throughout the hall. This is what's wrong with the world today. People cannot have a difference in opinion without being branded as monstrous. They cannot take a different stance without being chastised, cannot have faith in love more than hatred without being called a participant and accessory to evil. Turning to the panel with a sweeping gaze and once friends, she concluded, I came here to have a discussion, but instead, I received a public execution. But it is all right. I've survived worse, and I will continue to move on. I will keep building bridges. I will keep spreading the message of love. I will continue to believe in the goodness of most human beings, especially when they prove me otherwise. And with that, Dolly Parton walked out of the view. The empty studio was left with an awestruck audience and a panel of ladies who had no idea that their ambush would lead to a catastrophic backfire. The shot lingered on the chair on which America's sweetheart had been sitting just moments before. The silence a chilling reminder of how love had taken a turn for the worst, and that even the sweetest of the bunch were no match for today's harsh, controversial public square. The silence lingered on and on until Whoopi finally turned to the camera and choked back a sob. We'll be right back. But some wounds would never be healed, nor would things ever return to how they were. What did you think of this explosive fight? Do you think Dolly Parton was right to defend her peaceful stance and message of hope and unity? Or do you feel that a different form of political response was needed? We need your opinion and invite you to share your thoughts in the comment section below, and do not forget to subscribe for more shocking moments that you just won't see anywhere else.